Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen.
With me today is abundance teacher and money coach, Jody Lynn Creighton.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today. So how are you feeling today, Jody Lynn?
Wonderful.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Good.
Sun is shining, the birds are out. It's a beautiful day.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
I asked that question for a deliberate reason. I don't know if you picked up on that. But our guest today, Dr. Taylor Palmetier, is all about philosophy. So I had to find out how you felt.
Love it. I'm feeling great.
That's a good thing. I love that.
And excited about this conversation.
It's good. It's going to be good, I think. So let's bring her on. Dr. Taylor, how are you doing today? Welcome to the program.
Hi, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me today. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, we got to learn more about philosophy, but we also have to learn a little bit more about Dr. Taylor. So how did you become Dr. Taylor? I mean, usually there's like a story that's like, okay, this is my defining moment or my crash and burn or something that said, I got to do this. Is that true in your case?
I have a few of those. That's a loaded question. I don't even know where to begin with that. We could go all the way back to childhood for that one.
Well, we only have an hour, so, condense it.
Okay. So let's see. I always knew I wanted to be a psychologist. That's something since I was young. I studied psychology. I loved it. It's probably because of my own childhood experiences. Mm-hmm. I was a very anxious kiddo. I was highly sensitive. I came into this world just kind of wired to feel everything. Mm. And I didn't have significant major trauma like a lot of kids do, which I'm very fortunate and privileged for that. But my parents did divorce when I was younger. And because I had this nervous system that was ready to feel big things, it just kind of rocked my world.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I could see how that would actually lead to you wanting to pursue a career in psychology to make sense out of all of that.
Yeah. And at the time, there was this parenting trend in behaviorism. So it was a lot of consequences, shaped behavior, and feelings were pushed aside. So my parents, who are awesome, supportive there, they didn't know what they were doing. They thought they were doing the right thing. But for me, as a feelings kiddo, that wasn't what worked for me.
Yeah. Well, I think there are generations of people who could understand that one.
Yes, I'm sure. Yep. So I got through that part. I got through childhood, and I just knew, I'm like, okay, I got to help these kids who are similar to me be seen, be understood, be heard. And I talk to my mom about this all the time now. And she's like, we just didn't have the tools. We didn't have the resources for this. We didn't know. I'm like, I know, but I'm going to give them to you. I'm going to give them to everybody. So that was maybe the first crash and burn at, childhood that led me into this chapter now for the psychology degree. But there's a lot more, I guess, that shaped private practice and then shaped philosophy.
So, and tell us about where philosophy came from.
Philosophy, well, that kind of came to me one conversation on the phone. I'm like, I'm going to start a company called Philosophy. But it stemmed from my private practice. So I specialize in children and adolescents, and I've worked in various settings and then opened my own practice once I was licensed. And I worked with several kids and families for years, and I had a few things that just kind of came up that I couldn't shake. And one of them was, okay, there's so many kids who need help, and I'm with one after one family. So I was trying to cram as many families as I could into my schedule, and I was getting burnt out because I wanted to give all of these resources and tools to everybody, and you can't do that. So I decided I wanted to reach a larger crowd. That's kind of where this came from. I wanted to figure out a way to get tools into the hands of all families. And I'm not a public speaker. I'm hoping one day I'll be comfortable with that. So I don't want to get on the stage and do it. But I do want to give parents something tangible, easy to use. So that's kind of where this started. Mm-hmm. I wrote a book, and this was even before I started the actual company. It was more of an idea. And this book is more of a therapeutic children's book, and it has parent-child questions for connection and all the fun stuff. So that paved the way for, okay, let me take that and put this into a company. And that's kind of where it started.
Okay, yeah,
All
fair
the
enough.
truth.
And give us, the 60-cent tour on what philosophy is really all about.
Sure. So, okay, I've got three main points. It's my usual spiel on what
Okay, there you go.
philosophy
The
is.
elevator speech. I love
Right.
it.
Yes. So, okay. Number one, I do not want mental wellness to be a luxury. And in private practice, I saw that with all these phone calls I would get that wouldn't pan out because so many barriers to treatment. I mean, we have, let's see, so you can't access therapy because of finances, transportation. If you've got two working parents, how are you going to get to your kid to a therapy office in the middle of the day? All those things. So it's not accessible. Um, it seemed like the kids who are mentally well are the ones who were blessed with mentally well parents, and we're all a little messed up. So, I mean, I'm a psychologist and going into motherhood, I'm noticing my own stuff I'm bringing to the table, even after years of working through it. So, if we don't have parents who know their stuff and are educated or wanting to make changes in their kids' life, they're going to continue the cycle. So that's another luxury. Um, and then my other thought is that we teach kids ABCs, one, two, threes, all of that. That's, I mean, most of us know those things, and it's common knowledge to start giving our kids those tools from day one. So why not bring emotional language into the picture? Like our ABCs, like this is happy, this is sad. And I'm seeing progress, which is really cool, but it's just getting started.
Mhm.
So I want that to become something that we have in every household, that it's as common as the ABCs.
What do you think's holding that back?
That's a great question. I think so many things. There's a huge stigma around mental health. It's not fun to sit back and talk about sadness. It's uncomfortable, and we don't know how to do it. And it's something that I think generation after generation just said, "Suck it up, Buttercup." Let's
Yeah,
you. I think I've heard this before, that depression isn't real. Just get your butt
really
in bed and
interesting.
do it. Yeah, I've had parents say that actually.
Depression isn't real.
Yeah,
Really?
yeah, yep. So there was another aspect to the company, which is storytelling. And I saw the power of stories, whether it's weaved into play or it's an actual book, in every setting. I mean, you could be in community mental health, you could be in an affluent neighborhood, and kids are all communicating through story and play.
Sure.
They're not going to sit here like you and me and say, "Hey, I felt anxious today. XYZ happened and my body feels this way." They're going to throw their toy across the room and say, "I hate you."
Mm.
And it's our job then to help them uncover what that's really about. And part of that is using story and play to communicate. So the company is founded on that idea of, we're going to give tangible tools that are grounded in storytelling and play to parents to break the cycle, to do all those things.
Yeah.
That's my
Okay.
spiel.
No, that's good. No, good.
Wow.
That's a good speech. I like that one. The challenging thing there are a couple of challenging things that happened today. First of all, we have generational stuff that's been going on for generations, and a lot of it is gender based. But there's stuff that gets passed from parent to child, whether we want to or not. It just happens that way, and a lot of it could be addressed directly, but doesn't get addressed directly. And I think one of the main reasons it doesn't is because it doesn't really fit traditional gender roles. And
Yeah.
those gender roles, I mean, they're pretty deeply ingrained. I've actually been, I'm 2.5 years divorced, and being thrust back into the singles market kind of brought me up to speed on what's going on there. And quite
Mhm.
honestly, I was stunned. I was really shocked at just how little progress had been made along that line. I mean, if anything, I would say in some ways it's worse than it
Mhm.
was when I first got married. And
Interesting, really.
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that is a whole lot better. I don't want to mislead on that one. I think there's been across the board a great deal of progress. But I mean, the whole idea of projecting the idea of the emotionally restricted male, the strong alpha male. It's
Mm-hmm.
bigger now than when I was in my 20s. It's unbelievable.
People want that now?
Oh yeah. Well, single men actually are teaching it to each other. They're
Mm-hmm.
projecting it as this is the ideal way to get your woman of your dreams.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's kind of stunning, to be honest.
Yeah.
So yeah, that I'm a little aware of that.
That's very interesting. I'll have to do some research on that. I didn't know that. I thought we
Yeah.
were.
Well, to give you an idea, it's not only that it's taught to. Well, it has a couple of different aspects to it. One aspect to it is that the single men's market for a number of years was highly dominated by pickup guys teaching other guys how to be pickup artists, and there was a whole psychological manipulative side to that version of the alpha male, and a lot of that has carried over into the broader male singles market. So it gets taught very heavily, and the thing that gets really challenging about it is there are a lot of women who respond very well to that kind of treatment. So now the basic idea is, well, this is what works. This is how you're going to find the person that you're looking for. You know, and that's pretty severe stuff.
Yeah, it is. Wow, that's scary.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Huh.
it's quite a thing. So yeah, that's why I'm kind of interested in that side of it.
Okay.
Another side of it that I'm really interested in is what I call it's like an epidemic of victim psychology.
Okay.
And what I've really become aware of is that all of us, either to a very tiny degree, to a very large degree, or somewhere in between, have some aspect of victim psychology going on.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was looking for some commentary from you about that as well. So, I mean, I've given you a couple different routes. Which way do you want to go?
Yes. Okay. So gender roles, let's start there because that's interesting because I have two daughters
Okay.
and I'm watching some of this unfold, not necessarily what you're talking about, but I don't have boys, so maybe I'm missing that. But my girls, I do think there are some gender differences from birth. I mean, if you watch kids
Sure.
play early on, you're going to see that pan out, and I think our society definitely plays a bigger role than genetics do in that. Definitely.
Yeah.
But my daughters come home and they say things like, "Pink is a girl color." Jimmy wanted the pink toy, and I said that was my toy because he's a boy. And so we're having these conversations early on, but sometimes it's so ingrained in society that I feel like I don't even know where to start. They're getting these messages everywhere. I'm like, is it even worth it right now to try to have these conversations? But definitely I would say society shapes mental health, and the father figure being the kind of stoic, I don't do feelings type of parent. The mom is overly emotional, and there's so many dynamics that goes into that interplay. But kids model what they see. So part of my company is helping parents, especially moms, rewire their nervous system so they can be a model for their kids.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to, I'm still getting to the dad part. That comes next. But yeah, I would say there's a lot of work with men's mental health. And if it's being taught to be stoic and have a pickup.
Well, you're using the word stoic. That's another interesting piece to it because they use the word stoic the same way as well. But interestingly enough, if you look at the origins of stoicism has absolutely nothing to do with bearing your emotions.
Huh, really?
Has nothing to do with it at all. In fact, it actually teaches the opposite. It doesn't teach stuffing your emotions. It teaches choosing which emotion you're going to latch into. You can be faced with a situation that perhaps one choice would be to get angry about it, but you can choose another way to look at it. You could say, I'm just going to feel like, I'm really proud of where I am at right now. I'm feeling really good about this. So it isn't about stuffing it. It's about embracing the one that you choose.
Okay.
But that's not the way stoicism is taught today.
No, it seems like kind of cold, distant, and
yes,
I'm going to stuff it down and appear.
And it's considered by many to be a virtue, which just freaks me out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that is scary. Okay. So I'm currently creating a workbook for boys, and I struggle with this language so much. And my assistant and I are working on ways to make it more just gender neutral. But there's this huge market right now for boy themed mental health materials. And
Yeah.
I have the princessy, girly one, and I have daughters, so that comes naturally. And that's it's like it's what they want. They don't want superheroes. So even if I'm trying to make this neutral, they're not going to want to do a workbook with superheroes.
Mm.
So now I have this very boy themed, like with superhero language, and we're going on a mission. We're going to save the day. And it's reminding me of what you're saying of this, what they're teaching adult men to
Yeah.
do in the dating world.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's even being programmed into mental health. I'm doing it
Mm-hmm.
and it's requested, and I want the boys into this too, and that's my in. So that's an interesting it's an interesting conversation that could take a whole 3 hours
Oh
too.
yeah, I'm sure we could.
It's
Yeah, but you don't want to hear me ranting about that, so we won't do that for 3 hours. But no, it's a challenging environment that we live in today because there are, like I said, there are many things that are a lot better where mental health is concerned than they were when I was, say, in my 20s. So 40 years ago. It just is true. I mean, well, it's kind of like what you were talking about, how your parents didn't really have the tools. Well, nobody had the tools that. I mean, the tools didn't even exist. They basically decided at that point, well, there are some mental health conditions, and that's about as far as they've gotten. They hadn't really
Yeah,
developed beyond that.
right.
So
Yeah,
we have had a lot of growth in that area. But with any kind of growth, there's always challenges along the way, and I think that's what we're experiencing now. Those challenges that happen along the way. So
definitely.
I imagine that in your practice, because you work primarily with children and adolescents, I imagine in your practice, you're not looking directly at that piece because you're focused on one particular subgroup, but it has to play a role to some degree. What happens society wise. It's not just what happens in the family.
Definitely. And I've actually been seeing more older teens, young adults, and mothers lately because I'm virtual now. So when I started my practice, I was all in person, was doing actual play therapy, but I've learned it doesn't quite work as well over the screen with littles. So
Mm-hmm.
I am seeing more of the older population, and I'm understanding how the system is shaping these people, especially moms, which is why I started branching into working with the mother and motherhood journey. And the society it's giving messages of do it all, be a mom, breastfeed, go to work, be the snack queen, have a snack box ready to go. I have stories about snack boxes. And how do you do that? How do you be all of it and not lose your shit? Like
Yeah.
how do you keep it all together? And I'm so this is not necessarily the male perspective, but I'm in the motherhood part of it myself with littles. I've got a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old, and then I'm now working more with moms in the same boat and trying to figure out how do we work with these messages that we're getting
Mm-hmm.
and without playing that victim role, because that's coming up, that's a thing that's popping up a lot on socials, the victim motherhood, which I don't love, but it is a thing.
It is.
And trying to find the interplay, what's healthy in your setting boundaries, and pushing against what society says, and what's healthy with just learning to embrace this role of being a mom, because you're not going to escape it.
Right.
You're in this role.
So let me tie Jody Lynn in because Jody Lynn, you're a coach among other things, and so you deal with clients as well. You don't really necessarily go down this particular path because you're more of a money coach, but it must impact what you do too. I mean, what do you see in that role when you're encountering people? Do you see these kinds of themes playing up?
Oh, for sure. I see it playing out in my life. I see it playing out in my practice. Like I also have a financial brokerage. The way men deal with money is different than women. And watching, I'm the person at the table while the couple argues. I try and sit on my hands and wait until they're done. There's a resolution. But it's interesting watching, the dynamics between couples, men and women. And then when you bring the kids into it, I've been thinking a lot as this conversation flows about my own family and mental health. And my brother's going through some mental health stuff at the moment. And it's really interesting because my dad is I would say the correct definition of stoic.
Okay.
He doesn't, I've seen him not cry. I've seen him tear up once. I've heard him cry over an audio. But he's never been opposed to like sharing his feelings. We always have these really deep conversations. But in his younger years, when we were little, I remember him saying to my brother, because my dad's a cowboy and a farmer, and the type of person that people would see as just like, suck it up, buttercup, like boys don't cry, like those kinds of things. And my dad never wanted to be that kind of dad. And so he always had these conversations with my brother about like, it's okay to cry. And I remember seeing them and hearing them. And, my brother was very, very emotional throughout his entire life. We'd go to a funeral for somebody that like I knew, and he's bawling his face off, and I'm standing there. Like, I'm like, dude, you didn't even like the guy. Like, what's going on? It's definitely, it's interesting because we're taught all of these things. Like, I mean, even females nowadays, you got to be a boss babe. You can't cry. You can't let your emotions take over and all of these things. And I love how you put that about moms. Like, literally, you're supposed to be the cook, the cleaner, the snack maker, and it's all got to be handmade because you can't get crap from the grocery store anymore. Like the bar. Yeah. And then now, like after COVID, there's lots of families that are choosing to bring their kids home and school them at home. And they're taking on all of these roles and trying to be all of these things to your family and the world. There's a lot of messages there, and there's a lot of ways to get stuck inside of those feelings. I'm really interested to hear your take. Walt, you had kind of looped it in there, that victim side of things, because I see that a lot with mental health. And I have PTSD, I have this, or I have that. And it seems to be, in my perspective, which doesn't mean that it's right, just what I've seen is that sometimes it becomes this crutch. Like, I don't have to move on from this, or I don't have to figure out a way through this, or better my life because this happened to me. And I would love to hear your perspective on that, Dr. Taylor.
Yeah. So that's really interesting. And I have to tell this little story because this has been on my mind lately, this idea of victim motherhood, because I'm on TikTok a lot and posting all sorts of things and catering to moms. And I'm doing a lot on regulating nervous systems for moms in order to help their kids. And something that pops up is TikTok kind of labels it for you as like a search bar. And one of the labels they gave my video was victim mother. And I was like, I don't like that. I'm just talking about regulating nervous systems for moms. And that really kind of put me into that thought process. So it's interesting that that's coming up here because it's been on my mind recently. But I think there's kind of I don't even want to say a hard line between that, because it's really blurred, because we want moms and everybody else who are dealing with mental health issues to say, yes, there's something going on with me. It's okay to set boundaries with people. It's okay to not make your feelings my priority. But this is going a little bit too far now. And some people are saying, well, I'm going to set a boundary here. Your feelings don't matter to me. I'm going to do whatever I want, and I don't have to care about what your reaction is. So I think we took people pleasing and that side of things and said, here, be assertive. And now we're taking in the other direction. Now we have to work on helping people understand, okay, well, other people's feelings matter too. We need to have empathy. And not to bring the state of the world in, but I'm going to bring it in. There's a lack of empathy, I think, just in our world right now.
Mhm.
And that's not helping the process. There's a
Agreed.
lot of polarized perspectives, one group against the other, and we're not able to have empathy or engage in perspective taking. And I think that's transferring into our personal lives too.
That's actually where I've noticed it the most, is in that so-called political divide.
Yeah.
Because if you look, especially when you look toward the more extreme edges, the left and the right, is both of them are chock full of victimhood psychologies.
Oh my goodness.
Absolutely chock full.
Absolutely. Why don't we have a middle road? It doesn't make sense. Why do we have to subscribe to one of these sides? And yes, there's so much victimhood in there. And yeah, and that comes up in therapy a lot. Most of the people I'm working with tend to fall more into the people pleasing motherhood. So we are working on, okay, what do you feel? Your feelings do matter as a mom, because your feelings are going to impact your whole family because you're in this role. So if you're chaos and you're stressed, your whole family is going to feel that. So we have to work on you to help them. So that does go into the boundary line. But I also see other personalities coming in every now and then where we
Which
have
is good. It's nice to have the mix.
yeah, yep, you gotta have the mix, you gotta keep it exciting. So, and those people, it's more of working on that empathy
Mhm.
and learning those skills. So yeah, that's interesting that came up in our conversation, because the TikTok.
Yeah. But like I said, I mean, for me, it did originate. I first noticed it the most in the political realm. And I noticed it in terms of, like what I just described, how the further out you get toward the right or the left edges, the more victimhood that there is. And it's quite predominant. And I realized that victimhood is actually what's keeping the divided. Because if you're a victim and they're a victim, then you're constantly pointing fingers at each other. And there's never any resolution, because you're both in victim mode.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that becomes a pretty vicious cycle.
It sure is. Yeah. So we've got two victims bullying each other and saying, I'm the one who's having the problems here. You're causing
And you're the one who's at fault.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I wonder if building this skill, empathy skill, through emotional language in the home from early on will maybe years down the road create a generation of kids who might have more of a realistic thought perspective politically. I don't know, that maybe that's a dream, but I would love to
Hey, the
work
best stuff starts as dreams, so I'm okay with that being a dream.
And I do think that it'll make a difference, because it's like we have this language we're supposed to know, and everybody speaks it, but nobody knows how to actually speak to it or of it or through it. Like, it's all something that we have, but we have no idea how to use it for the most part, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We don't have the language to speak about this voice that we do have inside. I mean, we all, like you said, we all have it, but a lot of us lack the ability to speak about it or express it in a healthy way.
Something else that has cropped up in my own thought process, and partly through the conversations we've had on this show, because this show has been around for 12 and a half years. It was originally about law of attraction. It's kind of evolved beyond that. But one of the basic concepts involved in law of attraction thinking is the idea that when you're working on improving your thought process, changing your ideas around so that you get better things coming into your life, you're also having to work on who you are and how you treat yourself. And a big piece of that is something that I've also become very aware of in the last few years, which is just how much we beat the crap out of ourselves on a regular basis. My favorite way to say it, Jody Lynn and I have said it many times here on the show, if we treated our friends the way we treated ourselves, we wouldn't have any friends. And it's really, it's a good indication of just how brutal it is. My belief, and I'm curious to know what your take is on this, my belief is that a large chunk of the victimhood psychology comes from that self-criticism.
That's interesting. Yeah. Okay. So let's see. From self-criticism, become a victim. Tell me more about your thought process on that.
My belief is that the more that we criticize ourselves, the less self-confidence we have. The less self-confidence we have, we end up undermining ourselves. The more we undermine ourselves, the more we become victims. We become set up to become victims. We set ourselves up for those, and then we experience the victimhood. And then now we're into the realm. Okay, now I can be a victim.
Got it. Okay. So that deep insecurity from self-criticism
Right.
then plays out in the traditional psychopathology then.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Defense mechanisms. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think you just hit on like the main topic of psychological theory of how psychopathology develops, especially personality disorders.
Yeah, I didn't even get a degree. Who knew?
Yeah. There you go. Yeah. That
I'll
was
go
good.
get an honorary one.
There
Okay,
you
all right.
go.
But yeah, I mean that to me is a really big deal because among other things, it means that yeah, it's great to get therapy, it's great to get support, it's great to get taught, things like what's emotionally healthy and so forth. But it's also nice to know you can actually take responsibility for changing your experience about how self-confident you are just by working on how you treat yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah. And actually, in one of my children's workbooks, I have this section on becoming your own best friend,
Oh,
where
okay.
how you speak to yourself it should be like your own best friend. And then with adults, I say, speak to yourself as if you would a child, being gentle with a child. And you're absolutely right that is everything. Because if we're a bully to ourselves, our thoughts and our bodies interact, that mind-body connection is so powerful.
Yes.
That we're going to feel that. If we feel like we're bullied from the bully in our head, we're going to become bullied. And that might indicate your victimhood mindset that you were talking about there.
Oh yeah, that comes in very easily. When the lower the self-confidence goes, the easier the victimhood thing comes in.
Yeah.
Because I mean, bad things are going to happen. Hopefully, not really bad things, but bad things definitely happen in life. It's just that some people become victim associated, and others say, "Oh, it just happened. Yeah, I was a victim in that moment, but in this moment, I'm not. I'm done with it."
Yeah.
And that differentiation is the difference between I'm confident and I'm not confident.
Exactly. Yeah. And that reminds me of something my daughter's going through right now. She inherited my highly sensitive trait, and she's an anxious kiddo. So it's tough being a mom and trying to help your kid. You have all these skills you can help other kids with, but not my own. She doesn't want to listen to me.
Right.
So she, right. Yeah. So she's been really anxious lately. She's on a swim team, and they were playing this game yesterday, Sharks and Minnows. And the whole team was so excited to play. She was terrified. She was so anxious. She kept telling me, I'm just scared, but I really want to do it, but I'm just scared. I really want to do it. And she started to say, I don't know how to do this. I can't do it. I'm not a good swimmer. They're good swimmers. I don't know how to doggy paddle. I'm like, it's a silly game. Your doggy paddle is a funny thing, girlfriend. Like, it's not she's telling herself she has to learn the skill of doggy paddling to play this game. And it started to turn into this mindset of like, well, they don't want me here. Like I'm not supposed to be here. And I can see how those thoughts then would unravel in her friendships or other things if this mindset continues of, well, I'm not wanted, or I'm not meant to be here. Nobody wants me here. So I could see how that insecurity really drives kind of this other layer of I'm not wanted. And that's your fault. You guys don't want me here. So yeah, that's interesting to see that play out even in little's lives.
Well, more than interesting when you're the mom, because it's also reminding you of what you went through, and now your daughter's going through it. And like you said, you're the one she's least likely to listen to. So it's challenging.
It is. Yeah. And I'm thinking back to my own childhood too, of when I felt like, okay, my feelings don't matter. And all I needed was, someone to say they do, let's hear them. But instead, I think I kept going with that and feeling just so insecure. And where's that boundary then of where you actually say, hey, your mindset is screwing things up for you? And where do you actually make the intervention?
Yeah.
So that can be a tricky point.
It is. I mean, it's especially tricky when you're dealing with kids. It's tricky enough when you're dealing with yourself. I mean, let's be honest, it's tricky for anybody. Like for instance, when you're dealing with yourself, you can at least have the opportunity to make a decision about, well, yes, I was a victim in situation A, but after that, I'm more of a volunteer every time. I'm just going back and replaying that over and over in my mind. So I can at least do something about that. That's
Yeah.
one thing. But when you're dealing with the child or any other person, really, it doesn't have to be a child, any other person, you can't get into their head and do that for them.
Right. Yeah.
So that just adds layers of complexity to it.
Definitely. Yeah. I'm wondering if that's where maybe the separation from becoming the victim and saying, hey, you have no control over this person's thoughts or how they're responding to the situation. And there's nothing you can do. So at this point, you have to just allow them to have their feelings rather than you need to have empathy. You need to fix it for them. It's allow them to have their feelings. They're allowed to have them. And you don't have to jump in and change them because you can't.
Probably most of the time it's better that you don't.
Yeah, absolutely. That they're not your responsibility.
Yeah.
But you have a responsibility to the greater good to be kind and empathetic, but maybe not to fix someone else's emotions.
My ex-wife is a former psychotherapist, and one of the things that she told me about was very early in her experience. She worked mainly with people who were alcoholic or who had been assigned by the court system to get therapy, and so they were basically unwilling participants, which is always even worse of a challenge. And very early on, she was really upset because so many of her clients weren't making progress, and she felt like it was all her fault. And her supervisor had to point out to her, that's not your job. Your job is to provide the information. What they do with it is up to them. And that was like a light bulb going off for her, she told me. That, at that early stage of her career, just she hadn't thought of it that way because she thought that she'd gotten all that training so she could cure other people.
Yeah. I still have to remind myself of that if this person's not making progress, that's not my job. My job is to work with them through it, to not even necessarily coach them, but to process, to help them reflect and guide them, I guess we would say. Yeah, that is one of the best training things you can say to a supervisee.
Yeah, right.
Your job. Yeah, that's a good one.
How about for families that are like dealing with like individuals, whether it's their kid going through mental health issues? I know we mentioned it at the very beginning. Walt, you had said somebody didn't believe in depression, and like you often hear that with kids. I don't have any kids yet, but we'll hear like, oh, you're being dramatic, or like, what do you have to be like depressed about, or whatever. So what is the role and responsibility, or what are the things that people in those circles, if they have somebody in their circle that has mental health, what do they do with these people outside of saying you should get some help?
Not a bad thing to say, by the way, but
anyway. That's a really good question. And I think it's different if it's your child versus if it's like your sister or a friend. If it's your child, I think as the parent, it is our job. We brought them into this world. It's our job to at least give them some of the tools, or at least work on ourselves or educate ourselves to give that to them, to set them up for success. And I absolutely believe that. When it comes to our friends or our family, that is a tough line. And I think it depends on the person. How stressed are you? How much is it impacting your mental health? Do you have the space, the capacity to really, I don't know, sit with them and talk through things and help them in ways outside of you should get some help and go to therapy. And that's when I'm working with clients who are struggling with that, because that happens quite a bit. That's my first question of what are you capable of? What do you want? What role do you want to play? Are you okay and comfortable playing?
That's a great question.
It seems to help them reflect and decide where they stand. And if they say, I've got 20 things on my plate, I've got my own 4 kids at home, I will be a mess if I take this on, then we say, okay, let's work on the boundaries. Let's role play this. How are we going to communicate this? If they say this is important to me and I'm willing to be there, then we go down that road.
I'm reminded of something else that comes out of LOA circles. One of the things that gets taught a lot is the idea of doing affirmations, changing your visual presentations to yourself around the house and so forth. And I've heard stories of people who, like the woman is doing the work on herself, and the man is the beneficiary of it. So she'll go around, she'll put up post-it notes on the mirror in the bathroom or on the wall in the kitchen to remind herself about some happy thought or something like that. And she finds that it's affecting her husband because he was reading the same notes. So it makes me wonder, does the same kind of rule apply parent to child? I think it would. I mean, if the parent is doing stuff to promote his or her own mental health, it's got to have a positive effect on the child as well, I would think.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's one of the principles that my company is built on, is it's taking care of the whole family in order to help the child. So, and that's been more recent, of noticing how the mom plays such a big role in regulating her child's nervous system, and her mental health is going to trickle down into their mental health. So I actually say get the mom in therapy first, or the dad, who's ever home with the kids more. And we're talking gender roles.
Oh yeah,
typically the mom.
They just keep sprouting up. It's amazing.
Yeah, I feel that in my house big time. So yeah, I would say get the parent in therapy first, because they've got to have their defenses down and sorted through in order to hear what they need to do to help their kid. Because
if one really cool thing about kids, I mean, kids are sponges, and their parents are mirrors. And the kids will mirror back what it is that the parents are putting out. So it's a two-way mirror in a sense. I mean, it's really astonishing to watch how that plays.
Yeah. It freaks me out sometimes to hear my daughters, they say the things that I say. We do okay, we have two choices right now. Do you want to wear the red shirt, or do you want to wear the blue? And she does that to me. She goes, Mommy, I'm giving you two choices. You either give me what I want, or I'm going to scream. And so she takes it to a new level, but she's using my language. But on a kinder story, a happier story, she apologized to me one time after she yelled, and she came back up and she said, Mommy, you apologized to me after you yell at me, so I thought I should too. And that was a huge moment because I'm like, is this whole parenting thing that I'm doing, is this even worth it? Is this all fake? Because she was going crazy. And that was my reminder of, okay, she's mirroring what I'm doing. And it's more than just an apology and me trying to respect her. She's learning how to do these things.
Yeah, there's an old dad joke I like to tell. I've told it a few times on the show, but it's where the 2-year-old is in daycare. And in daycare, the daycare teacher is leading them through colors and decides to do traffic lights. So asks everybody, what does green mean? Well, green means go. And what does red mean? Well, red means stop. And what does yellow mean? And there's hush. And the 2-year-old says, oh, shit.
Yeah. That's a good
There's another example of it.
That is a perfect example. Yeah.
It's crazy. I'm curious to know, since you started philosophy, first of all, what's been the response? How have people responded to it? And second, can you share stories about what have come out of it?
Yeah. So the response has been positive. I'm still trying to get it off the ground. And I know that comes with just a year or two of really pushing it, learning the ins and outs of running a business, marketing, all of that. But I have a ton of support right now with family and friends who are in the community. I have books in a little local shop down the street that's for kids and stuff like that. So I think the response has been positive, and I'm growing on socials. I'm trying to create a funnel there. But it's a learning curve for sure. So ask me that next year.
Okay. All right.
My plan is next year is really going to take up.
Well, we're both entrepreneurs, so we know exactly what you're going through. Yeah.
I bet
it doesn't matter what kind of business you're in, you go through it. It's just that's part of it. This is your business therapy, actually.
Yeah, it really is. I'm learning and learning. It's a lot of self-growth in this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you learn a lot, right, Jody Lynn? I mean, seriously, have you ever learned more than you learned from being an entrepreneur?
No, I think it's because I think it touches, it's more than just business. That's the way I've treated it anyway. I've always looked at it like it's a reflection of my thoughts, my feelings, my perspective. So if something's not working in my business or not launching or whatever, I always go back to the source, which is me. I'm the common denominator in my own life. So it's been tons of personal growth in varying different ways, like that just stretch you and challenge you to the max.
To the max. That's really the key word.
Definitely.
That should be underlined 3 times.
Yeah,
Because it is
exactly.
to the max, especially when you don't want it to be to the max.
100%.
That's when you can count on it the most.
Yes,
Absolutely.
that's so true. I think that the most challenging part of the business therapy for me is making the choice to step back from my private practice. Because I need to dedicate a lot of time, as you know, to growing a business, learning all of this stuff. So yeah, it's been tricky to kind of put that on pause because it means I'm not seeing as many clients. It means I'm not bringing in as much money, and I'm convincing myself every day, this is worth it. This is worth it. We got to do this. So yeah, that's been a challenge.
One of my other co-hosts, his name is Joel Elson. He's a life coach and a former therapist in the Richmond, Virginia area. He is also a former gambling addict, has been through some really rough stuff in his life. And it's served him very well in terms of being able to connect to his clients. So it is all balanced out. He has a very successful career today. But he managed to do something he's done a number of things that people would say is impossible. One of them is that he actually helped to create not 1, but 2 clinics dedicated to people with gambling addictions, which, I mean, as you know, that's pretty tough because gambling addicts don't have any money. So how do you pay for it? And then he figured out how to actually make the thing work, which was something. But he got kicked out of the second one. Well, he says he left and that the other guy says that he was pushed out. It depends on your point of view. But the point is he left. And when he left, it was a surprise. It was not something that was planned. It was, just all of a sudden he's out of the clinic that he helped to start. And he wasn't sure really what he was going to do, but he's originally from Florida, and he makes an annual trek there to. He grew up on an island on the west coast of the state, and he goes down there to a particular bench on the beach that he sits on to get perspective, meditate, and so forth. And it's a meaningful bench to him because when he was in the worst of his problems with the gambling and so forth, he is actually sitting on that bench contemplating suicide and decided not to commit suicide. And so it became a very formative thing for him. But he had his plan anyway. I mean, he was ready to go. So he went. He came back. He was contacted while he was away by a friend of his who was a psychiatrist. I guess he's passed on. But his friend said, there's office space here. Now, this is about 11, 12 years ago, something like that. He said, there's some office space here. Have you thought about becoming a life coach? And this was before life coaching was really a thing. So my friend says, well, what's a life coach? I don't even know what that is. Are there any life coaches in the Richmond area? I mean, does anybody actually do this? But his friend said, you'd be good at this. Do this. So he said, all right, I'll give that a shot. And he talks about how he was fairly well financially set. He could last a year without any real difficulty. So he wasn't worried about it. And when he got back, he took on the office and he just went around to all the different psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, therapists, everybody who could think of in the mental health field saying, I'm now in business as a life coach. And within a month, he had an entirely full schedule.
Wow.
Which is a great law of attraction story, by the way.
Yes,
but it's also a story of how, I mean, he never really anticipated that was going to happen. He thought it was going to be like a year-long struggle.
Wow. And it wasn't, huh?
Yeah.
So what's the secret? Law of attraction?
Partly, sure. Yeah. He had a good mental attitude about the whole thing.
Yeah.
I mean, he knew that leaving the clinic that he had helped to start was actually a good thing because it was being run by somebody who was mentally ill. So it was probably a good idea to be out of there, even though it was frustrating for him to have to leave. But he also realized that it was helping him to do something that he'd always wanted to do, which was to go into private practice. He thought it was going to be as a therapist, but it wasn't quite as a therapist. It was as a life coach. And the more he thought about it, the more he realized being a life coach was actually better because he liked to incorporate law of attraction theory, which the state regulatory boards don't like so much. So, call yourself a life coach. You don't have to deal with them anymore.
Very cool.
Yeah. So I tell that story because to me, it's an illustration, first of all, of how things can turn out in ways that are completely surprising. But second of all, the ideas that we have about what's got to happen in entrepreneurship, they're not written in stone.
Right.
Right.
The story's flexible. Yeah.
I mean, it just happens. Jody Lynn has told her story numerous times. And was there anything on that map that actually matched what you thought was going to happen?
No. No, I look back on what? Huh? I wouldn't have like blindfold myself, spin myself in a circle 12 times and throw a dart, and I still wouldn't have guessed that I'd end up here. It's crazy. Wow. So many things can happen.
Yeah.
Huh. Very interesting. Yeah. Well, okay. Well, that's good knowledge then, that the story's unfolding. I'll just be flexible.
Exactly.
There's one thing I can predict with high level of accuracy. It will not be a straight path. That much I can guarantee.
Okay.
But I think that you're on the right path. Even like going back to what you do, that focus on the nervous system. I think that we miss that a lot in life. That practice of understanding what is the nervous system, when am I in flight, fight, freeze, and how is that impacting the rest of my life. As an entrepreneur, you have that skill already of being able to deal with the nervous system, calm the nervous system. So when the whole world is flashing red, whether it's the economy or it's, the war, what's going on in politics, or if it's looking at, like, oh, your client schedule and it's not as full or whatever, you have the skill in any one of those scenarios to calm your nervous system and then act from a place of power rather than scarcity or disempowerment. So you're on it.
Thank you. Okay. I like that. That's a good reframe. I'll stay in that one. That's a good one.
Yeah. Well, that what she's saying is actually quite correct. You have to take the same kind of skills that work and apply them to yourself.
Yeah.
Which is it's always harder. It's harder for the same reason that we're also the worst self-critics.
Yes.
The two go hand in hand.
Yeah, that is very true. And it is, I do feel like I have a good skill set with regulating my nervous system. So it does come up with business. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to. It's up and down, as you both know.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the one thing that I think all entrepreneurs who have stuck it out for more than a year or two can agree on, no matter how successful or even relatively unsuccessful, no matter what the path has been, no matter how rough it's been, no matter how many crash and burns they've had, I've yet to have an entrepreneur who's come onto the show anyway, and I've had hundreds of guests, I've had yet to have one of them say to me, it wasn't worth it. Yeah, every one of them has said it was worth it. Every single one, 100%.
Right. That's true. That's absolutely true. Yeah. I felt this way when I started my private practice of kind of creating a business, and then that became boring. So I'm like, not boring, I shouldn't say boring, but I wanted to do something more with that. And it's weird how you can go through that cycle so many times. And one business takes you to another path and opens up another door. And yeah, that's interesting.
The other factor is that no matter what your life path is, no matter what skills you bring into it, no matter what education you bring into it, no matter what your work experience is, you can be absolutely certain that at the end of the day, when you add it all up, you're going to use every skill you learned along the way. Every single.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Building
and in ways that you never anticipated.
Yeah.
That's right. That is very true. Yeah.
It's a very rewarding journey. It's scary. I won't play that part down. It's scary. It scares the crap out of you sometimes.
Yes, it does. It's a lot of risk. Definitely a lot of risk. And you have to be, I think, passionate enough and grounded in your vision to really go through with that risk.
And for somebody who's in practice like you are, working with kids and adolescents, that's actually huge. That gives you ammunition you would not normally have.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think so. I'm definitely passionate about it, and hoping to move this along the way. I'll use my nervous system tricks to get through the ups and downs. But yeah.
Okay, so you got to give us one trick. Give us one tip.
Nervous system trick. Okay. Yeah. Oh my gosh, I have so many. So I love intense exercise. I'm a runner, so I will sprint, and I will sprint uphill, and that seems to reset my nervous system. And I don't know if you like the Peloton, but I'm a big Peloton
Big
fan.
Peloton, okay.
Yes. So I will get on my Peloton and I will be running as fast as I possibly can. And I do that just for a short time, and then breathing. I love meditation. So I meditate quite a bit. That's a good nervous system reset. But those are my two go-tos.
My friend Joel would love, especially the first one. He's a gym rat, and he's been a
Okay.
gym rat for 40. He can deadlift 500 pounds. I mean, he's like the big
Whoa.
bulky guy, but he feels exactly the same way. Every day it's to the gym. His day starts by going to the gym because it's
Yeah,
such a great reset for him.
it is. It totally is. And those really intense ones, I love because it's like the biggest reset, biggest endorphin boost you can have. It just switches your mindset for the day. Yeah. Mhm.
This has been very, very good, very interesting conversation. We have a few things we like to wrap up each conversation with, though, at the end of the show. First and foremost, we need to find out how, if somebody wants to reach out and contact Dr. Taylor Palmetier, how do they do that?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I would say visit my website, which is ourphilosophy.com. And also, I'm all over social. So that's kind of where I'm trying to build my community right now. So I'm on TikTok, and my handle is at Dr. Taylor Palmetier. And on Instagram, it's Our Philosophy. So you can find me there. I've got links to all my books, all the tools. There's always discounts going on. We just made the whole website free shipping to make it easier, more affordable for families. But I would say the best place is the website.
And we didn't talk about the books, but briefly mention your books.
So I've got children's storybooks, The Color of My Feelings. I've got When My Lion Roars, which is for toddlers. I have a feelings art journal, which is the bestseller right now. It's a prompted 30-day art journal for kids where they respond just with art. And then there's reflection questions for parents and children to interact. And then I've got a couple workbooks, which are called The Bright Within, which is my gender stereotyped ones. But if you got a boy who loves the princesses, they're all about that one. Then go for that, and vice versa. And those are CBT based. So it's fun coloring, art activities, and goes through 7 core principles of CBT.
All right. Okay. Yeah, I was one who went outside the lines, but that's another story. So Jody Lynn is my second thing I like to do. Jody Lynn, as my co-host, always has a really great perspective on these conversations. And I like to ask her to tie it together. And I'm curious to see how she's going to tie it together today. So Jody Lynn, how are you tying it together?
Oh, man. Well, Dr. Taylor, I think that you're doing very, very, very important work. From my perspective, growing up, I'm so grateful that when I was a kid, I had a parent who, one, acknowledged my feelings, but also worked with me in understanding what it is that I'm feeling. That wasn't just dark and scary and angry and all of the things. But most kids don't have that. They don't have a parent that knows how to speak emotion or what to do with it after the fact. And I think it's so noble of you to take on the mission of wanting to help people that don't necessarily have the resources or don't have the time or, can't find it in their schedule because they can't take off time at work. These are all things that I think a lot of people are facing, but you're facing it head on with the way that you're building your practice. And I want to lean on something that you said early in our conversation about impact. I do believe that when and as we continue to teach our kids, the next generation, and ourselves how to love ourselves through all of this emotion and do something with it, it will change the world. So thank you for doing what you're doing. It's important.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate those kind words and this conversation. It was really fun to chat about it, and thank you for listening.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I've been very glad to have you. And in fact, that leads to the last thing I like to do at the end of the program. I noticed once we entered the 21st century in the age of the internet, among other things, we can do this. We can have a conversation where you're in Carolina, I'm in Connecticut, she's in Alberta, Canada, and I have a co-host in the UK. I mean, it's just an amazing thing that couldn't have happened 30 years ago. And it's wonderful. And along with that have come social media and blogs and podcasts and books that are published by the authors themselves. And I mean, all kinds of stuff has been coming along. People creating their own courses, for goodness sake. In the process of doing all that, though, we've learned a new way to market. We learned how to market ourselves, something that was not a skill 30 years ago. It's not something most people did, but it is a big part of being alive today. And in the process of doing that, we share a lot of information because that's part of our missions. That's why we end up doing these things in the first place. And we share it with people we never meet and we never see. Sometimes we do, but most of the time we don't. And that's where I noticed a gap, because we don't get appreciated for that so much. So Dr. Taylor, on behalf of those people you've never met, never seen, never will meet, never will see, who you've been helping in ways you didn't know about, on their behalf, thank you for what you're doing, because you're making a difference in this world.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
We appreciate you as well. And thank you, Jody Lynn, as usual. Good stuff.
Thank you.
I love it. Thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.